Hello and welcome back to another Demis Hellen tutorial. We're talking loops today, and can you use them? Why should you use them? Why should you not use them? There's all these questions floating around, and it's a case of, can you use them creatively? Do they fit with your track? Does it spark an idea? There's so many ways that we can approach this, and a lot of people just say, don't use samples, don't use presets, make it all yourself. And you can do this, that is absolutely fine. But at the same time, if you've got something that fits pretty well, and there might be just something that you don't like in that loop, that might be a snare right at the end of the phrase before it starts again, you can cut that out and use the entire loop, or loop the first half. There's so many things that we can do, or we can even isolate samples, so we can isolate hat loops or a clap in there, or a hat. That would make more sense if you find something that fits with your track and has that style that it's fitting with. Why not extract it out of a loop? No problems at all with that. And don't forget, loops and samples come pretty heavily processed already, so they're really good to go when they get put into it. So very little editing and EQing and things like that. It's already kind of made ready to go, and you just need to slot it into your track. Okay, we're going to take a look at this loop section here between bars 7 and 9. And we're going to drop this percussive loop in here. Now, there is a particular part of this loop that I don't want in there, and I suppose you're going to guess this as soon as you hear it. I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do about it. So we've got a hat loop already going here. So if I just rename that so it says perk there as well, this is what it sounds like at this moment. So you can hear that it's just a basic hat, open hat that is happening off beat at the moment, coming from a drum machine, and that is it. That's all that's happening right now. So we're going to add this loop in here, and let's take a listen to how it sounds now. So as you can hear straight off the bat, that snare just does not fit into this mix. We could do some EQing, we could reduce its volume, but then we're going to start editing all the other elements that are within that, so it's not really an option. So what am I going to do in this case? I'm going to see if I can omit the snare from the sample and see if we can utilize just the percussive elements, because it does have a nice drive. Very like typical track to use as well. It's a very typical sample to use as well. So zooming in here, we are going to zoom in and open this up a little bit. Okay, so this is going to be really easy. We're going to turn off quantize for now, and we're just going to go to the second bar and chop that section out. So you can see that's one of the snares, and then on the other one, clearly it's going to be on this section. So I'm just going to omit that as well. Let's zoom back out, get our two sections, and we can choose to mute those sections so they are not playing. So let's have a listen now. Okay, so first things first, it adds too much of a gap, but it introduces quite a bit of movement, especially with those bigger gaps. And we could use a few different techniques to resolve this. We could fill it in with another loop, or add some extra hat data down here with some other samples to fill in those gaps and start to generate some sort of pattern that fits in with this groove, and then balance the volumes out. Or we can zoom in a little bit more. Let's just undo our muting, and you can see that the snare kind of ends here. The tail of the snare will still be in there, but it could add a nice texture to it. So we're just going to delete that section. So instead of deleting the whole frame, we're just going to chop those in half. So again, on this one here, I'm just going to chop it before the bar. So we capture that hat, and we're just going to omit the snare again. So now we shouldn't have as much of a bigger gap. Now if we delete these, so now we just have a gap, and we could do a few things. We could double these up so they hit twice in that gap and it totally closes it up. But I do like the sound of that pace, and we can utilize a few techniques to fill in those gaps now. And the first thing we're going to do is add some delay. So I've just put this delay plugin, it's a stereo delay, onto this hat loop. And we'll start off by setting this to 1/8 notes, and we'll drag that dry wet mix down to about 9 o'clock on each one. Let's just see what we've got so far. Okay, so it starts to mask those gaps up, and yeah, it's not sounding too great at the moment. So we're going to bring up the low pass filters there. So we're not really, let's just go for around the 350 mark for now. We don't want to get any of that low end in there with that delay. Okay, so we're going to go with dotted on this one. Let's just try on this one. Okay, so I've just stopped that panning going from left and right as a hard pan and more of just a softer edge on that, so it's not too bad. And that's starting to fill the gaps in there. It's not too bad if we just go to inserts here and we'll just bypass stereo delay. And back on. Okay, starting to sound a little bit better, so let's listen to that in context. Okay, so it's still sounding a little bit odd, a little bit off, and we could balance that out with some compression or just lower the volumes. We could do a few different things, so I'm just going to start with putting it through some compression, and again, I'm just going to put it through Pro C2 so you can see exactly what's happening. You know what I do with these tutorials. Let's just go really hard on that compression. Open the attack to let some of those transients still come through before the compressor starts slamming those peaks down. And I want it to be quite transient and choppy, so I'm going to drag that release down there. And a bit of a harder knee, so it's coming in a little bit harder. Let's just drag this back, and I'm going to aim for about -6. That's just over -6. Let's just keep going. So it's a lot more fluid and just natural driving, but this adds a little bit of choppiness into it. So essentially what is happening there is we have those gaps and it sounds a little bit too push and pull and gives that effect of there's a lot of movement in that sound. So crushing it down a little bit just in a sound design way, not to compress it so it's transparent or anything. We know there's a compressor on there. I'm opening the attack and closing the release, so it's taking a bit long time to open up, so it's letting those really hard transients come through, which is ideal for percussive elements. And then the release is really short, so the compressor's shutting off straight away as soon as those peaks have gone and opening back up to that full volume, and you get that choppy sound from it. So again, let's just listen to how this sounds. So it almost has this really thin, metally feel to it, so it doesn't sound as impressive on the mix, but as soon as you add that in, it adds a little bit of choppiness, but at the same time it brings those lower volumes up and it starts to make it sound a bit thicker. Okay, so it's sounding a little bit better. If we bypass the stereo delay and this is what we originally had with the gaps. So with that stereo delay, I'm just going to drop it down a little bit more. It's a little bit too intense, so about 6.5-ish or something like that. Okay, so now that we add that in with our sub bass, we need to do a little bit of balancing. So for now, for the sake of this tutorial, I'll just bring this volume level down. So the aim of this particular idea with that sample is to put it a little bit into the background, so shaving off some of that top end. You can hear that it's not very bright. It would have been originally before I put this EQ on here, and that just pushes things back a little bit into the mix and puts it more into that percussive area without all the brightness, giving that driving force and sitting alongside with the bass. So there's a lot of mixing to do on that, but you can hear that it sounds a little bit better than it did, and we've utilised it better than what we did before with that horrible snare in there. So we can add our own snare and we could get something that sounds very similar, but at least then we have full control over it. So I'm going to find another loop in here. So let's go to drum loops in here, and they're not always the best loops to use out of here for my style, but we'll find something. Okay, so there's quite a nice clap in there. That is something that I typically jump on board with. So I'm just going to drag that into the project. Turn the grid on here. And it should have automatically timed that. So I'm just going to slice it there, because I only want that first part. Get rid of all of these. And we'll take this section as well. So again, we could do a lot of processing to keep that clap in, but I'd rather have control over that clap. So we're going to do the same thing again, and we're just going to analyze this sample and see what we have in there. It's a very simple one compared to that other one. So you can hear it has a lot more emphasis on the clap. There's a bit of pre-delay on a reverb in there. So let's see if we can do the same thing again and start chopping this out. So I'm going to grab the scissors, turn off the quantize, and we'll turn it to there. Let's just see how that goes on that first one. Okay, so we've missed the beat there. That is entirely my fault there. There is the clap. And we'll cut it right off up to that hat that comes in there. So it's too obvious, and it's something that I'm not prepared to go into too much detail. So you can see there, just from doing that, it's not the sample for the track. So it's a good way to learn and understand. Some samples can. This has got a lot of energy in it, this one. So we can omit that snare out of there, just put a bit of delay on, or fill it in with some other samples, or duplicate certain parts, and you'll get a much better rhythm. Now we can rearrange these rhythms as well. So if we decide, right, we don't want that rhythm, we're just going to duplicate this. So we have, so there's a lot of low end cut off there. So let's just turn them off. That's better. And we're going to zoom in and we're going to rearrange these up a little bit. So here in Cubase, and we need to grab this whole track here and quantize it. There we are. So we can come in with the scissors and we can change this to use quantize, and we can snap at the quantizes there, as you can see. So let's just take that first bit and we'll loop that first section. In fact, let's just chop these bits up here as well, so we've got 2 bars. Okay, so let's make this sound a little bit different. I'm going to snap that off to the beat. And again there. You can see that has quite an effect on that. We can drag this piece in. Now it sounds a bit strange at first, but we can control its gain. And we can generally just start mixing this up, so we could put them like that. So now we get a different feel. It's starting to do a little bit of a roll. That sounds a little bit better. So again, with the kick. There's a lot of things that we need to sort out. We just need to sort out some volumes, but we can do that with all of them here. So with different velocity values there, just by reducing the gain, we've created something entirely different. So we started off with this one. So now we have something a little bit more subtle that can fit in the background, and it can even layer on top of that original one to give it a little bit more drive. And finally, if you wanted to take a certain part of that sample out, if we delete these percussive elements here, in fact we'll delete these first bits as they have all had volume changes. We'll go in and chop these up here and say that we want this offbeat hat. That seems to happen here. I think it's an offbeat hat. Let's just jump in there. Okay, so we have that offbeat hat. We could just isolate that entirely and have that playing for the entirety of that section. And yeah, there's going to be some processing that we need to do. We could go back into the inserts, just turn on that EQ again. This one. Plenty of work to be done on that, but you could use it to add a little bit more body to your otherwise quite crispy and thin open hat. So you could add a little bit of percussive element to it, shall we say, because it's got a few percussive elements in there where the sounds are overlapping from that. So there's so many things that we can do. And before we end this video, another trick here is to make sure that you kind of roll in and out your samples to stop any clicks and pops. These things are audible, and if they're not audible, they take up your headroom and you considerably start degrading your mix. So make sure that you roll them off so you get a nice straightforward sample. And that brings this shorter video to an end. This is a little insight into how I use loops and start to manipulate them and just mess around with some ideas to get things fitting nicer into the track. If you enjoyed the video and you found things useful to add to your own mixes and things, let me know down in the comments. Also, let me know in the comments what techniques that you use as well. It's always really handy to share it with the community so other people can have a dabble at doing these certain techniques in their own work. Finally, hit subscribe and the bell icon. That is 3 videos per week. And if you hit that bell icon, it will give you notifications as soon as I upload on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesdays. So, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.